putting together some charts and stuff for us while I've been contending with my computer issues still. This is actually the new computer, but I will not bore you with the details of that. Today, what I want to do, I think we started to look at the Sugya and the Gemara last time. So before we go back into the Gemara, I'm going to try to help everybody keep straight in their minds the things that we need to keep straight. But there are actually several categories of things that we need to keep straight. And I'm going to tell them to you. We're not going to put them all together today. But the thing that we're concentrating on now in particular is what was the order of the korbanot that was brought on Yom Kippur. That is, all of the korbanot that would be brought on a normal day, plus the korbanot that are special for Yom Kippur, plus the korbanot musaf. The other things we need to keep in mind are when the Kohen Gadol had to change clothes. As a subset of that question, we have to know when he had to wash his hands and towel, and then wash his hands and legs, towel, and wash his hands and legs again. We learned there was a machloket about that between Rabbi Meir and the Chachamim. Learned that a long time ago, and we need to come back to that. But I'm going to leave. So that question of kiddush yadayim v'raklayim and tefillah and so forth, I'm going to leave. But the reason I'm mentioning it now is because it's relevant to this question of the order of the korbanot, and this is how. When we read the Parsha in Achrei Mot, so it gives us a list, an order of things that the Kohen Gadol is supposed to be doing on Yom Kippur. However, Chazal had a masoret that the Kohen Gadol had to change his clothes 5 times that day. So just to remind ourselves, so that the avodah that he did on Yom Kippur that was done inside the Beit HaMikdash, he had to wear the Bigdei Lavan. And for all the other avodot, he wore the Bigdei Zahav. So in a moment, we're going to take a look again at Achrei Mot, and we're just going to note the difficulty, right? Because the difficulty is that the change of clothes, that particular order of the change of clothes is not explicit in the pasuk. It's not explicit in the Torah. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Ultimately, this question of when he did the different korbanot is intimately linked to when he changed clothes. And that's what I'm trying to put together for us today. And with that, and then we'll see the machloket between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva, the way the Gemara explains it. Their machloket is about the particular order of some of the korbanot that were done that day. But everybody agrees that you have to do all of these korbanot. Everybody agrees that korbanot that were done inside the Beit HaMikdash, or had some aspect of them that was done inside of the Mikdash, had to be in the Bigdei Lavan. And everybody agrees that that he had to change clothes 5 times. Those things are all agreed upon. And so those are the things that we're trying to put together in order. So to that end, I actually made a couple of spreadsheets. I was hoping to have them ready before this shir to send them to you, but I'm still working on them. But they will be workable for today. Okay. Let's start with this. So this is Parshat Acharei Mot. This is my own version. In other words, I didn't change the psukim, but it's with my highlights. So today I highlighted the korbanot in particular that have to be done. So what were the korbanot that are mentioned explicitly in Acharei Mot? B'zot yavo Aaron el kodesh b'far ben bakar lechatat v'ayu liola. Okay, so Aaron, we know he has to bring a par chatat and an ayu leola. In our reading of the Mishnah until now, so we went through the avodah of the par chatat. So the par chatat, and then 2 psukim later, he also has to bring me'et adap b'nei Yisrael yikach shnei sirei zim lechatat v'ayu echad leola. So the par and the seir, those are the par of the seir hanisrafim, and those are the par and seir that after each is slaughtered, the blood is taken and sprinkled in the Kodesh HaKodeshim and then in the Kodesh, Neged HaParochet, and onto the Mizbeach. So that's one thing. While we're here in this parsha, actually no, I'll come back to that. But in terms of what's mentioned here in the parsha, in terms of korbanot per se, there are 4 korbanot. So far we've discussed, in the Mishnah, we've discussed the par and the seir, this particular par and this particular seir, because we have another par and another seir that we have to take care of from Musaf. So let's take a look for a moment at the korbanot Musaf. So the korbanot Musaf are in Bamidbar, Perek Chavtet. So here the korbanot Musaf. Yikravtem ola l'Hashem reich nifach, par ben bekar echad, ayu echad, kvasim v'nei shana shivat minim hiyu lachem. So these are the first korbanot Musaf. So there's another par, but this is an olah. It's not a chatat. There's another ayil, which is also an olah, and then there's 7 kvasim. And then in addition, at the end, a few psukim later, it says, Sir izim echad chatat, milvad chatat kippurim, milvat tamidim min chatat v'niskehen. So there's also another seir that's brought as a chatat. So in terms of the korbanot musaf, so technically these are all korbanot musaf. So what do we have? We have a par, an ayil, and 7 kvasim, and a sir chatat. So that's another 10 korbanot that are going to be brought as korbanot musaf. And then the other korbanot that have to be done, of course, are the korban tamid shel shachar and the korban tamid shel ben ha'arbayim. So if you count them all up, there's 16. But as we mentioned last time, there's a machloket tanaim about this ayil that's mentioned here in Parshat Bamidbar, Parshat Pinchas in Bamidbar, this ayil, is that an additional ayil? Because we have two elim that are mentioned in Parshat Acharei Mot. Is this an additional one, or is it the same as the ayil la'am? So when we learn the machloket between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva, they are going to both hold according to the Shita that this ayil was the same ayil as the El Ha'am that's mentioned in Acharei Mot. So it will yield us altogether 15 animals, which I believe when we read the Rambam last week, that's how the Rambam counts. That's the halacha, is that there are 15 korbanot for the day. So I will just give you a quick glance. For the time being, I made these two charts. This is the Shita of Rabbi Eliezer, which we will see. And what I did is I put in column A is the animal or animals that are being brought. Column B is the type of korbanos, the chatat or nola. Column C is why it's being brought. Is it korban tamid? Is it something special for Yom Kippur, Yom Kippurim? Or is it a korban musaf? So we'll see this inside, but I'll just go through this now. According to Rabbi Eliezer, everybody, of course, is going to hold that you start with the korban tamid shel shachar. Rabbi Eliezer then says that the next thing is going to be the way it's related in Acharei Mot, which is then the Kohen is going to do the parchatat and the seir. I call this the seir ha'am, which is also a chatat. And then afterwards he'll do the two elim, the El HaKohen and the El Ha'am, and the El Ha'am is the same one as is mentioned in Parshat Pinchas. And then he'll do the korbanot musaf before he does the tamid shel ben ha'arbayim. That's Rabbi Eliezer's order. Rabbi Akiva's order is going to be different because he's going to say you're going to do some of the musaf along with tamid shel shachar. Right, so he says you do the keves of the tamid shel shachar, and then you do the par and the shivat kvasim, which are musaf. You do them right after the korban tamid. Then you do the seder avodat hayom with the par of the kohen and the seir of the chatat, which are the sirim, the par v'sir nasa bifnim, and they're nisrafim, right? They're burnt. Their carcasses are burnt outside of Jerusalem, and then you do the sir nasa b'chutz, which is the chatat of musaf. You don't do this part of musaf right away. It's interrupted by the par v'sir, but then you do the korban musaf, then you do the elim, and then you do the tamid shel ben ha'arbayim. And we'll go through this now in the sugya and the Gemara, and we'll start to get an idea of why they have what the basis for the machloket is. But I've introduced part of it by telling you that Rabbi Eliezer is essentially trying to stick more closely to the order that's brought in Acharei Mot, right? Because when we look at Acharei Mot, so Acharei Mot doesn't, as we mentioned, as we talked about last time, right? It doesn't tell us that you also have to do the Korban Tamid Shel Shach and the Korban Tamid Shel Ben Arbaim, because the Torah says elsewhere you have to do that every day. So that's assumed. But it does tell us this, right? That presumably after you've done the Korban Tamid Shel Shachar, then you'd bring the Kohen is going to be bringing the par and the seir, and he'll do all of the avodah with the par and the seir. Let's just see how it plays out here.
Sure.
Yes.
When you write Yom Kippur in the third column,
yes,
it's not clear if it's a part of Musaf or if it's a part of Tamid. Here you have no choice. It must be a part of Musaf. So I don't.
No, when I write Yom Kippur,
I don't really understand because.
Go ahead.
Our tefillah on Yom Kippur, we have Shacharit, which is in place of the Tamid Shel Shachar, and then we have Musaf, which comes in place of the Korbanot Musaf, and afterwards Mincha later on, yes, is in place of the Tamid Ben Arbaim. So each Korban should belong to something, to either to the Tamid or to the Musaf.
So, not exactly. In other words, the tefillah is not precisely going to parallel the way it was done in the Beit HaMikdash. So, when we do the Korban, in other words, we don't really have an avodah per se that we do that's keneged, let's say, the elim, or is keneged the par, the seir lechatat. However, as you brought up a couple of times, that seems to be the reason why Paitanim did this whole Seder Avodah and inserted it into Chazarat HaShatz of Musaf, is so that we would be at least aware of all of the korbanot that the Kohen Gadol actually did. But we don't have a parallel. So I can write, so in the spreadsheet that I made, in the chart that I made, the things that I marked as Yom Kippurim, I marked them because they're distinct from Korbanot Musaf. They're not the same, right? In other words, we have Parshat Pinchas that lists the Korbanot Musaf. We have Parshat Acharei Mot that lists these four Korbanot that are not technically Korbanot Musaf. They're not called Musafim. There's something that's particular to Yom Kippurim. I think the other thing that we do on Yom Kippurim is we also have Ne'ilah. We install Ne'ilah, which adds and that maybe that other dimension. There's historically, it wasn't necessarily the only time that Ne'ilah was said. Ne'ilah could have been said on other Ta'aniyot. But the Ma'aseh, this is what comes down, that we only do Ne'ilah on Yom Kippurim. So I think part of that is, I think one of the reasons is it instills within us this idea that there are these other categories, that there's more categories, there's at least, or put it this way, there's an extra category of tefillah on Yom Kippurim, which, even though it's not precise, but it's ki'ilu keneged, it's in correspondence to this extra category of korbanot that were done on Yom Kippurim. Because on a normal day, you have the korbanot tamid. On Shabbat and Moadim, you're going to have the korban tamid and the musafim. But on Yom Kippur, you're going to have the tamid, the musafim, and these extra korbanot that are special for Yom Kippurim. So that's why I marked it as Yom Kippurim. And the only one that you could be mefakpek about is the El Ha'am, because as we say, the El Ha'am that's mentioned here in Acharei Mod, Shnei Sirizim Izim L'Chatat V'Ayil Echad L'Olah, that's Muskam Bein Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva, that's the same ayil that's mentioned in as one of the Korbanot Musaf. So that's also, it's conceptually very interesting that it works out that way, because it's like an overlapping of these two discrete parshiot, right? We have Acharei Mod here, and we have Parshat Pinchas way over here, but there's like this overlap of the ayil, which connects them. Again, not everybody agrees with that, but that's the way, that's the sugya that we're learning now. If we learn the sugya long enough, we'll actually get to that machloket. We're not going to get up to that today, I'm sure, but it may be worth doing that. So let's also think about this now as we're going through. Let's go through these psukim in this way. Let's think about what the Kohen Gadol would have been wearing when we're learning Acharei Mod. I want to bring up at least one other issue to be aware of. So here, B'zot yavo Aron el Kodesh b'far ben bakar l'chatat v'ayil la'olah Ketoned bad kodesh yilbash, u'michnesei bad yiyu al b'saro, v'avnei bad yachtot goer, u'mitznefet bad yitznov, bigdei kodesh hem rachatz b'mayim et b'saro l'veisham. Okay, so here this introduces the bigdei lavan. So Aaron has to come with a par for chatat and ayil v'olah, and he's also going to have to be wearing bigdei lavan. So knowing what we know, let's say just based on psukim, so knowing what we know, when he's doing the korbanot prior to this, let's say the korban tamid, he'll be wearing the bigdei zahav. So he's going to start off the day wearing bigdei zahav, and then he's going to start to do the avodah for Yom Kippurim. So he'll have to change into the bigdei lavan. Okay, he'll also have to bring Shnei Sirezim l'chatat v'ayil echad l'olah. V'ikriv Aaron par chatat asher lo v'chiper bado lad beito. So that's when he does the vidui on the par, which is the vidui for himself and his family. Then he takes the Shnei Seirim and he does the Goralot. Then v'hikriv Aaron et Sa'ir asher alav v'goral Hashem yasal chatat. Right, so the one that's Hashem is going to be mufrash as a chatat, will be set aside as the korban chatat. So in the meantime, as far as we know, he'll still be wearing the bigdei lavan. Right, he's all the time wearing the bigdei lavan. Etc. So the other one is going to stand there waiting for him to finish his other avodah, and then will ultimately be sent off. Then in Pasuk Yud Aleph is when he actually is makriv the parachatat asher lo v'chiber bado lan beito v'shachat et parachatat asher lo. Right, so that's when he actually shechts the par. So until now, what has he done? He's set aside his par, he's brought forth the Shnei Seirim, he's done the Goralot on the Seirim, and so one of them now is going to stand opposite the eastern gate, and the other one is going to be brought over to the place where it'll be slaughtered, but first he slaughters the par, then he has to go and do the Ketoret for inside the Kodesh HaKodeshim. Lakach melo machta gachalei esh ve'al mizbeach lifnei Hashem melo chafnat Ketoret z'mitaka ve'evim mibeit laparochet. So he'll bring in the censer into the Kodesh Kodeshim. He'll put the Ketoret on the fire in there. Then he's going to go out. He's going to bring Pasuk Yudal Lakach Midam HaPar V'Yiza Be'etzva'o Pnei HaKaporet Kedma. That's when he comes in and sprinkles the blood of the par inside the Kodesh HaKodeshim. And then he goes out, he shechts the Seir L'Chatat, the Seir Ha'am L'Chatat, and then he's going to go back into the Kodesh HaKodeshim with the blood from the Seir, and he's going to sprinkle the blood of the Seir inside. And then he also has to do this sprinkling inside the Ohel Moed, neged the paroche. He goes out to the Mizbech, but going out meaning he just goes out. He's still within the Kodesh because Chazal understood this to be the Mizbech HaZahav. That's when he sprinkles the blood on the Mizbech HaZahav. And again, all of this avodah that he's doing, this is all particular to Yom Kippurim, and it's all done. It's all this avodah that's done inside the Beit HaMikdash, inside the Hechal, inside the Kodesh HaKodeshim. So he sprinkles all the blood. Then what does he do? Then he does the Seir LaAzazel. I'm kind of skipping over some psukim here. Okay, so now we get up to after he does the bidui on the Seir LaAzazel, right? So Macharon and Shteyadav Arosha Seir Ba'achai V'Tvadav at Kol Benot Bnei Yisrael V'Kol Pishehem V'Chochat Otam V'Natan Arosha Seir V'Shilach B'Yadish Iti HaMidbara V'Nasah Seir Alav at Kol Benatan V'Eretz Seirah V'Shilach Seir B'Midbar. Okay, so he sends off the Seir. So then Pasuk Kav Gimel it says Aaron El Ohel Moed Ufashat et Bigdei Habad Asher Lavash B'Vo'o El Kodesh V'Hinicham Sham. So Pshuto Shel Mikra is at that point he goes back into the Kodesh HaKodeshim, and he removes his clothes and he leaves them there. So there are two problems with this pasuk. One of them is, that we can't really imagine he's going to go into the Beit HaMikdash and strip down naked and walk out, right? That doesn't seem to make sense. There seems to be something missing here. But the other thing is, in terms of the clothing, so basically he's done in this parsha, he's done those 4 korbanot plus the Seir LaAzazel and all of the avodah that's connected with them that he's going to do. He's done all of that wearing the Bigdei Lavan. And then afterwards, what does it say? Kaftan brachatzit besor b'mayim b'makom kadosh v'avash et bigadav. He goes out and he goes to the mikvah. He puts on his clothes. V'yatsa v'yasa et olato v'yat olat ha'am v'chiper ba'ado v'ad ha'am. So he goes out and he does his olah and the olah of the am. So what is his olah and what is the olat ha'am? Again, just in terms of the Achrei Mot itself.
I mean, so his olah would be the par, right? Par kohen.
No, the par was a chatat, and the seir was a chatat. So what does that leave us?
It leaves us with the two Eilim.
Right, so we have the two Elim. So right, up earlier, right, you said he comes with Par ben Bekar Chatat, the Ayil Ola, and the Am has Shnei Sirezim Chatat, Ayil Echad Ola. So now that he has finished doing the Par and the Seir the Azazel, he changes his clothes, and then he does et olato v'et olata'am. Now he'll do the Elim, right? That's the Pshuto Shel Mikra. Now he'll do the Elim. So those, he doesn't do those in the Bigdei Lavan, even though they're particular to Yom Kippurim, but they're all done bachutz. They're all done outside of the Heichal and the Kodesh HaKodashim. So the Torah says he's going to change his clothes. The chelev from the chatat, in other words, from the chataot, from the par and the seir, which were both chataot, the chelev, the fats from them, were what we call the emurim, we just explained last time. Those he's now going to offer on the mizbeach. Then the pasuk goes and tells us a little bit more about the Sir Azazel. Sir Azazel chabes b'gador achatzet b'soro b'mayim v'achrechen yavo ha'machaneh. So this guy who brought the Sir Azazel, he's going to become tamei, so he has to go to the mikveh, and only then can he return to the Beit Hamikdash. And pasuk Kav Zayin v'et para chatat v'tzir chatat asher huva et damam lechaper b'kodesh. So the par and the seir that he brought of whom he brought the blood inside into the kodesh and the kodesh HaKodashim. What happens to those? Right. So far, what happened to them? He slaughtered them. He brought their blood and sprinkled it inside the Kodesh HaKodashim and then inside the Kodesh. And then a couple of psukim ago, we just said he took the emurim, the fats, and he burnt them on the mizbeach. But what about the rest of the body, right? What about the carcass that's left over? Yotzi al michutz machaneh. So those two chataot, those have to be taken outside of the machaneh. B'sarfu ba'esh et orotam v'et b'saram v'et kirsham. The rest of them the rest of the bodies have to be completely burnt outside of the machaneh, and in the time of the Beit Hamikdash, it meant outside of Yerushalayim. So that's the part of the Seir HaNisrafim that we learned about in the last chapter. Those are going to be burnt. And then it talks about this, but the Kohen Gadol doesn't do that himself. Somebody else does that. It just says, then it says, so whoever burnt them, he also becomes tameh, and so forth. Okay, so if we were to put this together based on Pshuto Shel Mikra, then we would say, okay, he started off the morning before all the things in the Parsha, he would have done Korban Tamid. When would he have done Korban Musaf? Probably he would have done them also in the morning, for reasons that we'll see. It's based on the Psukim in Parshat Pinchas. That's probably the simplest way to understand that he did them then. But it's also possible that he waits to do them until later. So we have to leave that as a question mark. But he wore the Bigdei Zahav. And then when he comes to do the Par and the Seir L'Chatat, he's going to have to change his clothes and wear the Bigdei Lavan. But once he finishes with sprinkling the blood and sending off the Seir L'Azazel, then he's going to change his clothes, and then he'll do the Elim, the Olot for the Am, and essentially finish off the rest of the work, which is going to, Echshahu is going to include If he hasn't finished the Musafim, he'll do them after the Elim. And of course, he'll do the Korban Tamid Shel Ben Arbaim, right? And again, I'm only talking right now about Korbanot per se. I'm not talking about the other things that he has to do, like the Ketoret and the Menorah and things like that. We'll fit that in later. So based on this, he would only change his clothes twice, because he would have started off with the Bigdei Zahav. He would have been wearing the Bigdei Lavan for the Avodah that's related to the Par and the Sir Chatat. Then he would have changed his clothes back to the Bigdei Zahav to do the Elim and the rest of the Korbanot. So Chazal, so here's the problem. So Chazal had a Masoret though, that he wore the Bigdei Zahav 3 times, and he wore the Bigdei Lavan twice that day, that he actually had 5 clothing changes. So this is one of the issues. So these are the issues. This is all to lay out the issues. So I started off by saying, okay, before we even get to the question of the Bigadim, we have the issue of, we have these 15 or 16 korbanot, depending on how you count, that all have to be done today. So what exactly, aside from the Korban Tamid Shel Shachar, the Korban Tamid Shel Ben Arbaim, who we know are always going to be the first and last of the day, what's the precise order of the rest of them that are going to come in between? So that's one issue. And then if he has to change his clothes, back and forth, he's going to be wearing Korban Bigdei Zahav 3 times, Bigdei Lavan twice. So when exactly does he change the clothes, and why? Okay, so in terms of the why, we're not going to get to that today either. The Gemara does talk about this question of knowing that he had to make these clothing changes, but let's leave that. We're going to just take that as a given for now, that he had to do the clothing changes. So these are the things that we need to bring together. So let's now, at this point, let's go back and look at the Gemara again. Although first I wanted to remind us of something, just a second. Yeah. I wanted to remind us, because this is just something to keep in mind. We'll have to probably remind ourselves again. But the end of chapter 6, after we learned about the way the Siyur Azazel was done, in Perek Vav Mishnah Zayin, it says, Balo Eitzel Parva Seir HaMisrafim. I just wanted to remind us of this. The Kohen Gadol, meanwhile, back in the Beit HaMikdash, the Kohen Gadol was going to go back to these animals that he had slaughtered, the Par and the Seir, whose blood he sprinkled inside. Kra'an Hotzia De'Murehem. That at this point, that's when he tears them open and removes the Emurim. He removes the various fats. V'tanam b'mages. He puts them into a mages. A mages was a kind of a kli that was just there to hold on to these. Remember what we just saw in Acharei Mot. He's going to have to burn the chalavim from the par of a seir on the mizbeach hachitzon, and he's going to be doing that in the Bigdei Zahav. So what he's doing now is he's getting ready for that. He's going to remove the emurim, and he's going to set them aside. He's not putting them on the mizbeach right now. He puts them into a mages. He puts them into a kli until he will be ready to burn them on the mizbeach. Tiran al gabei mizbeach, kla'ad v'mikla'ot, and then they're going to weave them in a weaving. In other words, they're going to take the carcasses, kind of weave them together on two sticks. And they will take them out to the Beit HaSreifa. And who's going to take them out? These other Kohanim who are going to burn the part of the Seir. And right, we'll skip a little. These are all things we did, so we're not going to necessarily go through all of them again, but let's just remind ourselves, Amru lo kohen gadol higia seir lamidbar. So this preparation for burning the chalavim and for burning the carcasses of the seir and the par, those were things he was doing after he sent off the seir la'azazel. So then they come and tell him, Kohanim are going to report to him that the seir is already arrived at the midbar in the wilderness. And then we talked about that. How did they know? Okay, so there were different methods that they would have used for knowing at what point that would have happened. So once he knew that the Seir Azazel had done its job, that's when we come to the beginning of the chapter that we're doing, chapter 7, which begins Ba'alo Kohen Gadol Likrot. So at this point, that's when he starts the laning. And as you recall, what else was going on while he was laning? He was laning in the Ezrat Nashim. And what else was happening at the same time?
They were burning the two other korbanot, and they couldn't see both at the same time.
Right. So at the same time, the par and the seir, the chatat, were being burnt outside of Yerushalayim. Right, and that's what we said. If you saw one, you wouldn't be able to see the other. But those are the two things that are happening. So the Kriyat Torah is not explicit, of course, in Parshat Acharei Mot, but this is when it was done. It was done in that context. And that's why at that point, he could have already removed the Bigdei Lavan, but he wasn't yet ready necessarily to put on the Bigdei Zahav. So either he could read in the Bigdei Lavan, or he could read in this Itzlit, he could read in this Chaluk that he had that wasn't technically the Bigdei Lavan. Okay, so now we're up to this Mishnah again. Im bevigdei butz koreh, kidesh yadav v'raglav, pashat yarad v'taval alav v'nistapek. So if he, until now, had been reading in bigdei butz, then at this point he washes his hands and legs, He strips down, he tovels, he gets up, he dries himself off. They bring him now the Bigdei Zahav. And then he gets dressed. And again, he has to be Mikadesh Yadayim V'Raglayim. Yatsa v'yasa et elo v'et el ha'am. He goes out and he does his ayil and the ayil of the am. So we know very well, these are the elim that are mentioned in Achrei Mot that he still has to do, that are special for Yom Kippur. That Shivat Kvasim B'nei Shana. And at this point, he's also going to do the Shivat Kvasim of the Musaf, Divrei Rebbe Eliezer. So of course, Zeh Kol Tov Yafeh, but even before we get to Rebbe Akiva, we want to know, okay, but what about the other Korbanot Musaf? He also has to bring a par as a Korban Musaf. That's not the par that he did already. That was a par chatat, that was particularly Yom Kippur. But as we saw in Parshat Pinchas, he also has to do a par olah for Korban Musaf. And he also has to do a Seir Chatat as Korban Musaf. When is he going to be doing that? But according to this, in any event, Rabbi Eliezer is saying, okay, Adkan, so what, according to Rabbi Eliezer, what would he have done until now? He would have done the Korban Tamid, Shel Shachar. He would have done the Par and Seir L'Chatat in the Bigdei Lavan, whose blood was sprinkled inside. Now he's doing the Elim in the Bigdei Zahav. And then he'll do the Shivat Kvasim from the Korban Musaf. Divrei Rebbe Eliezer. Rabbi Akiva Omer, in Tamid Shel Shachar Hayu Krevi. They were brought with the Tamid Shel Shachar. So what was brought with the Tamid Shel Shachar? Well, what did Rabbi Eliezer say was brought just now? He said the Elim and the Shivat Kvasim Tamimim B'nei Shana, those were brought now. Rabbi Akiva says in Tamid Shel Shachar Hayukri. So what is he saying is being brought? Was brought with the Tamid Shel Shachar?
The 7 Kvasim and the
We're going to have to say it's this, even though you might say it's everything that Rabbi Eliezer said, but we're going to have to say it's just the Shivat Kvasim. He's saying that the Shivat Kvasim, which is the Korban Musaf, which are part of the Musaf, would have been brought with the Tamid Shel Shachar. We would not say that Rabbi Akiva is saying that the Elim would have been brought with the Tamid Shel Shachar. Why not? Why wouldn't he say that the Elim were brought with the Tamid Shel Shachar? You know, it's a lot to hold in your head. That's why I should have sent you the charts to. But just to tell you, in other words, just to remind you, this is what we just saw in Achrei Mot. Nobody's going to say that the Elim are things that are mentioned in Achrei Mot. They're not Korbanot Musaf per se. And we saw in Achrei Mot that he doesn't do the Elim until after he finished sending off the Seir LaAzazel and changing back into the Bigdei Zahav. So nobody is going to claim that the Elim were done with Tamid Shel Shachar. They're only going to be done later in the day. So when Rabbi Akiva says, "In tamid shel shachar hayu krevim," he means the shivat kvasim. Those shivat kvasim, which are part of the korban musaf, he says to Rabbi Eliezer, no, they were that part of the musaf that would have been done with tamid shel shachar. It wouldn't have been now, after he did so much of avodat Yom HaKippurim. And what about the other parts of the musaf? Ufar ha'olah v'se'ir hanaseh b'chutz hayu krevin in tamid shel ben ha'arba'im. And what the rest of the korbanot musaf, which is the par ha'olah, and the seir hanaseh b'chutz, which is the seir chatat that's mentioned. Those are the rest of the musafim that are mentioned in Parshat Pinchas. Those will be brought with tamid shel ben ha'arba'im. Okay. But as we said, there's problems with the way the Mishnah is read because we don't know according to Rabbi Eliezer. So when does he say that the par and the seir hanaseh b'chutz, when are they done according to Rabbi Eliezer? He doesn't address them. He only talks about the shivat kvasim. And also, how do I read the Mishnah? Rabbi Kiva Omer in tamid shel shachar hayu krevim. Maybe when it says ufar ha'olah the seir hanaseh b'chutz hayu krevim in tamid shel ben arba'im, maybe that's not divrei Rabbi Akiva. Maybe that's everybody. Maybe that's both Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Eliezer, and that's where they both address the question of the par ha'olah and the seir hanaseh b'chutz. And then on top of that, we would want to know, why is the korban musaf split up? Bein l'Rebbe Akiva, bein l'Rebbe Eliezer. The korban musaf gets split up. Certainly according to Rebbe Akiva, because he's saying the shivat kvasim were done in the morning, and then the par and the seir hanaseh b'chutz were brought in the evening. So why did they get split up? Okay, so we have all of these questions. So all of this was, I would say, okay, it's more than an introduction, but again, I'm trying to help us keep all of these considerations in mind now when we start the Gemara, because these are all things that the Gemara knows before it begins, that the Gemara needs to deal with. So let's look at the Gemara. Okay. So here's the Gemara. The Gemara says, they asked them. In other words, the people learning in the Beis HaMedrash asked the rabbis in the Beis HaMedrash, Heichika Amar. Heichika Amar Rabbi Akiva. How do we understand what Rabbi Akiva is saying? Im tamid shel shachar hayu krevim, ufar ha'olah v'seir hanaseh b'chutz im tamid shel ben ha'arba'im. Does he mean to say, when Rabbi Akiva says, im tamid shel shachar hayu krevim, does he mean that they were brought, that tamid shel shachar, that the shivat kvasim were brought in the morning, ufar ha'olah u'seir hanaseh b'chutz im tamid shel ben ha'arba'im, O dilma hachi kamar im tamid shel shachar hayu krevim, the shivat kvasim were brought in the morning with the tamid shel the shivat kvasim were brought in the morning with tamid shel shachar. Ufar ha'olah bahadayu. The par of the olah was brought along with the shivat kvasim. U'seir anaseh b'chutz im tamid shel bein ha'arbayim. And the seir anaseh b'chutz, which is the korban chatat of Musaf, that would have been brought bein ha'arbayim. So I just want to point out something here. If you have a regular Gemara, you would see, I made this note here in the Mishnah. This is a little technical, but when we were learning the Mishnah, I mentioned this. This reading of the Gemara here seems to be problematic. In other words, if we look at the Mishnah says, Rabbi Kiva omer im tamid shel shachar hayu krevin, ufar ha'olah v'sir naseh b'chutz hayu krevin im tamid shel ben arbaim. So now the Gemara wants to know, from this word here, ufar ha'olah, does par ha'olah go back? Is it part of the previous stitch? Is it part of im tamid shel shachar hayu krevin ufar ha'olah? That is, the shivat kvasim were brought with the Tamid Shel Shachar along with the Par HaOlah. In other words, the 7 Kvasim and the Par, which are of the Musaf, those were brought in the morning. The Seir Naseh B'chutz, which is the Korban Chatat of the Musaf, that was brought in Tamid Shel Ben HaArbayim. Or is that what it's saying? Or is it saying that only Shivat Kvasim were brought in the morning, and Para Olah Seir Naseh B'chutz were brought with the Tamid Shel Ben HaArbayim? Now, the problem with this reading that Para Olah was brought with the Tamid Shel Shachar is then we end up reading it like this: Rabbi Kiva omer im Tamid Shel Shachar hayu krevin ufar ha'olah. That's fine. I could read it like that. But then the next sentence says, Usir naseh b'chutz hayu krevin im tamid shel ben arbayim. Sir naseh b'chutz were brought. It's in a lashon rabin, right? It's a plural form, hayu krevin. So this hayu krevin seems to indicate there's only one way to read this. The only way to read it is to say that par ha'olah usir naseh b'chutz hayu krevin. So I put this in brackets because apparently the gears, we see also from the question of the Gemara must not have had those words, hayu krevin. Otherwise they wouldn't ask the question. And if you look in Tosfos here on the page, and also in the Hagot of the Gra, they didn't have the girsa of hayu krevin. That's just a technical point, but it's just, otherwise we don't understand the question that the Gemara is asking. But now that we've cleared that up a little bit, I hope, we understand. So like if we remove these words, which I will just temporarily erase, if we remove these words, then I can read it, then I have this problem because I could read it two ways. In Tamid Shel Shachar hayu krevin ufar ha'olah, Usir naseh b'chutz im tamid shel ben ha'arbayim. Or in Tamid Shel Shachar hayu krevin, stop, ufar ha'olah usir naseh b'chutz im tamid shel ben ha'arbayim. Right, so I don't know about this par ha'olah, but we understand why it's a question not only because of this literary problem about which clause does it refer to? Does it refer to the previous clause or refers to the next clause? But of course, it's a conceptual issue. Am I going to, the par and the shivat kvasim, again, those are part and parcel of the korban musaf. And so is the Seir Hanaseh B'chutz. All of them are those are the three parts. Those are three of the parts of the Korban Musaf. The Par, Shivat Kvasim, and the Seir Hanaseh B'chutz, otherwise known as Seir Chatat. Either way, no matter how I'm reading this, according to Rabbi Akiva, I'm going to be splitting them up. Either I'm going to do the par and the Shivat Kvasim in the morning with Tamid Shachar, and I'll do the Sir Chatat with Tamid Shel Ben Arbaim, or I'm going to do Shivat Kvasim in the morning and the par and the Sir Chatat Ben Arbaim. That's my question. But as we pointed out last time, and I think I pointed out again today, when we look at the psukim themselves in Acharei Mot, not in Acharei Mot, in Parshat Pinchas, it would seem like it would make more sense to bring the par along with the kvasim, because that's the way it's brought here. Par ben bekar echad, ayil echad, kvasim b'nei shana shivat tzminim yiyu lachem. And then Sir izim echad l'chatat milvat chatat kippurim. That in the psukim that's brought much later. So we understand the psukim in the Torah itself is making a distinction between the par, the ayil, and the kvasim, and the Sir Chatat. So the idea that I would bring the Shivat Kvasim in the morning and the par in Ben Harbaim, it's a little like it's hard to reconcile that with the psukim. But that's the Gemara's question. The Gemara's question is, when I want to understand Rabbi Akiva, how do I understand him? What was he saying? Is he saying that the par ha'olah goes in the morning along with the Shivat Kvasim? Or does the par ha'olah go in the evening with Tamid Shel Ben Arbaim, along with the Sir Naseh B'chutz? So that's this question. Ibailu hechi kamar in Tamid Shel Shachar hayu krevin, that the Shivat Kvasim were brought in the morning. But the par and the Sir Naseh B'chutz, those were brought along with Tamid Shel Ben Arbaim. Odil mahachi kamar. Maybe you have to read it like this: In Tamid Shel Shachar hayu krevin, the Shivat Kvasim, ufar ha'olah bahadayu. The par of the Musaf was brought along with them. Sir Naseh B'chutz, Tamid Shel Ben Arbaim. That's the question. That's one question. So how do I read Rabbi Akiva? The two. Par ha'olah, the Rabbi Eliezer, the Shayarei. The par ha'olah, according to Rabbi Eliezer, who left it out, who doesn't mention it. Eimat avidle. When does he do it? Since he left it out, it's not clear when does he think it should be done. Again, it's a question with the par ha'olah. So so is it going to be done in the morning or is it going to be done in the evening? The two, Bein the Rabbi Eliezer, Bein the Rabbi Akiva, Emurei Chatat Eimat Aviduhu. Right? Whether according to Rabbi Eliezer or according to Rabbi Akiva, when exactly is he going to be maktir? Is he going to put on the Mizbeach HaChitzon the Emurei Chatat? So far in our Mishnah, we haven't mentioned this, right? All we saw in the end of the previous parak, he has taken the chalabim out. He's put them into a mages, and they're ready to be burnt on the Mizbeach, but he hasn't burnt them yet. He hasn't put them on yet. So we want to know, according to Rabbi Eliezer and according to Rabbi Akiva, exactly when is he going to do that? So these are our questions. Let's just see Rashi here. The two par ha'olah Rabbi Eliezer d'shayarei v'lo ayrive. He doesn't talk about the par ha'olah. Rabbi Eliezer doesn't mention the par ha'olah. Eimat avidle. When does he do it? Rashi points out, we could have also said to Rabbi Eliezer, when does he do the seir chatat of the of the Korban Musaf, the Sir Hanaseh B'chutz. We could have also asked that question. Ela Reish Milta Nakat. It just being Reish Milta, like the Varish, it takes the first thing. But it means, what about what the Rashi is saying is, the Gemara is asking, what about the Korbanot Musaf that Rabbi Eliezer didn't say, which would be the Par HaOlah and the Sir Hanaseh B'chutz. When did, according to Rabbi Eliezer, is the Kohen Gadol going to bring those? Emurei Chatat, the Tana B'idach Pirkin, Nitanam B'megeis Ad She'ak Tirei. Because we learned in another chapter, it's in the previous chapter, that the Kohen Gadol, put them into this mageis, into this kli, until he would be ready to offer them on the Mizbeach. So those are the questions that they asked about our Mishnah in the Beis Medrash in Bavel. So Rava says, Amar Rava lo mashkachat la matkanta ela ola Rabbi Eliezer ditana de Beis Shmuel ola Rabbi Akiva kid ditosefta. So Rava says we can't find a way to fix this, like a fixing for this, except for Rabbi Eliezer, according to the version that we learn from Tana de Beis Shmuel, and for Rabbi Akiva, the version that we learn in the Tosefta. In other words, Rava is saying the Mishnah, the way it appears to us now, doesn't actually give us enough information to answer these questions. It's the Mishnah itself is missing information, and the only way you can fix and understand these shitot of Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva, respectively, is from other Tanaitic sources, from Braitot. So Rabbi Eliezer, we're going to learn his shita from Tana de Beis Shmuel, and we'll learn the shita of Rabbi Akiva from the Tosefta. Anybody who's interested, you can look in the Tosefta. It's in Perek Gimel. It also brings the shita of Rabbi Akiva, and it's interesting that Rava splits it up and has Rabbi Eliezer from Tana de Beis Shmuel and then Rabbi Akiva from the Tosefta, but that's more technical than we need to get. We're going to take a look and see exactly what we're going to learn from these other sources. So Amarava, let's just see Rashi. Lo mashkachat la matkanta ela, right? So lo mashkachat la v'seder avodat hayom matkanta b'mishnatena. We're not going to find a way to a way to put together our Mishnah regarding the order of the service that was done on Yom Kippur. Ela mashkachat la matkanta, but we will find a way to fix it, put it in order. For Rabbi Eliezer, the Tana de Beis Shmuel, the Ayir Bekuhu, because for Rabbi Eliezer we can find his shita in Tana de Beis Shmuel, because there they speak about all of these issues that we asked about. Or Rabbi Akiva, or for Rabbi Akiva, we'll find his matkanta, we'll find his repair in the Tosefta, Shepirei Sham et Dvarav Yafem, because there they explain his words well. Bid Rabbi Akiva lo garsinan, Bid Rabbi Akiva lo garsinan yatzab yasan. We don't have to. That was a girsa that Rashi rejected. We don't have to look at that now. So we're all. I think this is a lot to take in for one. For one shir. So I think we're gonna end off here. And so next time we'll pick up from this part of the Gemara, where the Gemara puts together the shitot of Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva. And then I think what we're going to do is we're actually going to push ahead in the Gemara, because the Gemara is also going to address this question of the changing of the clothing and how that works into this question about the Seder Avodah, and also why there's so many changes of clothes and so forth. So we'll leave that for the next shiur or two. So this is a bit of iyun into this, but I just decided when we came to this Mishnah, as you see, it is very difficult. And we could have just learned the conclusion from the Bartanura, but I thought it would be better if I try to put these sources together to make it more understandable. So I hope I made it more understandable and not more confusing.
It's more understandable.
Thank you. Okay, that's reassuring. Okay, so that's it for today. Thanks very much. And, see you next week.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Good night.
Shkoach.